The story begins as a powerful and brave adventurer makes his way through a dungeon. His name is Rent, and his mouth nearly drops to the floor when he encounters a terrifying winged monster with sweet-looking biceps. This thing looks insanely powerful, as we see that it has a mouth inside of its other mouth when it screams. Rent has never been more terrified in his life, and just now realizes that he will not be able to survive this encounter. The giant Digimon-looking beast makes its way towards our hero, so he can't stop shaking. He can't believe this is happening to him, as he thought he was going to achieve his goal of becoming a mithril class adventurer. That goal is probably going to get way harder though, as the beast bites down on him with all two of its mouths. Sometime later, Rent is surprised to find that he's still alive, but that surprise doesn't nearly compare to the bone-rattling shock he feels when he sees that he is somehow just a skeleton. The disbelief rattles him to his very empty core, and he screams in horror over what he has become. A look into the past shows a time when our brave protagonist still had flesh and organs and stuff. This guy has no clue what's coming, so he is super optimistic to start another great day as an adventurer. It's seriously early in the morning, and that is typical for adventurers, but he thinks about how lucky nobles and scholars are since they can sleep in late. Waking up early is going to be the least of this guy's problems, and he explains that he's a low bronze class adventurer. He was born and raised in a town way too small to be on a map, and travels through it to go to get a job. These jobs are provided by the Adventurers Guild, and they are given based on an adventurer's specific rank and skill. The guild probably does it this way so stupid adventurers can't mess it up and get themselves killed or turn into undead skeletons. There are a ton of jobs ranging from awesome monster extermination to lame material gathering. Some boring looking dorks call out to our boy, and Rent explains that he will be going back to the labyrinth because there aren't any good jobs. These lazy degenerates can't understand how Rent can work so much, and they run off to play Fortnite. Rent explains that while most adventurers like to party up, he remains solo. It's not for any cool Lone Ranger type of reason though, it's because he simply isn't very good. This guy's been adventuring for 10 years now, but he's still only bronze, which is the second lowest rank. He makes a living selling stuff from cautious jobs he takes, but he is very frugal. This guy lives a pretty dull life as he tries to be conscious of every move he makes. Well, he really screws that up though, as we watch this guy walk right into the labyrinth that's going to change him forever. In this dungeon that has been thoroughly explored and completely deserted, Rent is shocked to find a secret passageway. This is an amazing discovery, as he is likely the first person to find it, so the dummy throws caution to the wind and begins exploring it up. As he walks through the area, it becomes certain that it's unexplored, so he hopes to find some valuable magical weapons. Rent becomes excited though as he realizes that he can even make a small fortune by simply reporting this news to the guild. At this point, Rent is too dumb to notice all the obvious signs that this place is super dangerous, and he finds himself in the room where he meets his demise. We watch again as he comes face to face with the thing he calls a dragon, and he explains that it's the greatest of all monsters. According to legend, dragons take many forms, and some are considerably larger than most standard dragons. That is certainly the case for this dragon, as it seems to have just digivolved into its final form. The sheer pressure exerted from this terrifying beast is enough to freeze our boy Rent, and he instantly realizes that he doesn't stand a chance against Dragonmon. Back to the present, Rent wonders how he is still alive after being devoured. The shocking reality hits him, and he begins to wonder if he's even actually alive, since he's very much just a skeleton. What he is an immortal monster known as an Undead. Sure, that sounds cool, but a bishop or priest could easily destroy him with their purification magic, since the Undead are not meant for this world. Rent sure is doing a lot of thinking for a guy that doesn't have a brain, and he begins to wonder if he's actually dead. He is still conscious and has his memories, so he must be alive to some extent. Unable to answer all these existential questions, Rent decides to head back to town, but quickly realizes that doing so will only get him in trouble. He will be captured and probably executed. Rent doesn't want to die just yet, but he confuses himself when he starts questioning his existence again. Rent finally decides to just ignore all his problems and get out of this room as soon as possible. As he exits, Rent explains the mysteries of the labyrinths. No one really knows where they come from or how they work. There are many all around the world, and tons of valuable treasures can be found inside them. However, monsters lurk around every corner. Everyone is busy at some new labyrinth right now, but solo adventurers should be coming to this dungeon in a few days. Rent plans to ask them for some advice on his situation, but quickly realizes that he will have to learn how to talk without a tongue. Just then, an actual skeleton monster appears, and Rent prepares to fight his twin. He can't even really move properly as he feels so heavy, and he determines that it must have something to do with his lack of muscles and all the other stuff non-dead people have. He was pretty weak already as a human, but now it's way worse. These skeletons were actually pretty easy for him to defeat as a human, but he can't even raise his sword without falling now. Rent freaks out as he is totally vulnerable, but the dumb skeleton is even worse than he is. Rent realizes that he can't use any fancy sword techniques, considering he's just a bunch of floating bones, but he remembers that he can use spirit energy. Luckily it works even though he isn't really a human anymore, and he uses it to buff up his physical abilities. With his attack power raised, Rent absolutely destroys his opponent's skull, but he gets shocked when the thing starts to glow. He realizes that he just recovered the spirit energy he just used and wonders what could be happening. A look into the past shows some chick teaching Rent a thing or two about monsters. They have a mysterious trait. With time and experience, they evolve into greater things. This is true for humans as well, since they grow with training, but monsters are on another level. She uses skeletons as an example. Usually, skeletons simply remain skeletons, but on rare occasions, they evolve into ghouls. This is known as existential evolution, and Rent gets an idea. He thinks about how ghouls are also undead, but they sort of resemble humans since they have flesh. If he can somehow become a ghoul, then all he will have to do is wear robes and masks so that he might be able to return to town without people being terrified of his boniness. Rent finds some optimism as his new goal now is to defeat monsters in the labyrinth and become a ghoul. Back in town, we see that Rent's friend is disappointed that he never came, so she will just make dinner for herself. Back in the dungeon, we see that Rent is putting in work as he has already defeated 5 skeletons. He has gotten his mobility back and learned that light from his defeated enemies heals him. Because of it, he can use spirit energy during every battle. Rent decides to find some stronger monsters and finds a slime. They are still considered weak, but they are not to be underestimated. Physical attacks are not as effective on these types, but Rent doesn't have the ability to use offensive magic. All he is capable of is starting fire, not suitable for battle, so he decides that he must attack with his sword anyway. There is really only 2 ways to defeat a slime, and that is either by piercing its core or by breaking it apart until it can't regenerate. After dodging the slime's attack, Rent counters and is shocked to see that he did it. He determines that he just got lucky by striking its core, but doesn't question his victory, and takes a magic stone as his prize. He then collects the slime ooze to be sold later, since it's used as a cosmetic to make ugly people less ugly. At the guild, 2 people discuss how some newbie has been looking for a party to join. They were going to recommend that she party up with Rent, but he hasn't been around lately. The newbie was pressed for money though, so a guild member recommended that she go to an easy labyrinth to find treasure and materials. She didn't know it, but this labyrinth is the same one Rent is in. In the labyrinth, Rent explains how he doesn't feel things like sleep or hunger, which is fine since anything he eats would probably just end up going right through his bones. He has been fighting non-stop too, but it's becoming clear that existential evolution takes a long time. His physical abilities have come back though, and he can use mana too. What's most surprising though is that he can still use his divinity despite being undead. In addition to curing injuries and illnesses, divinity can purify water and delay the spoiling of food. Rent uses it to make some bread last for 3 more days and hopes that he will have a normal body that needs to eat bread by then. For now though, he refocuses on his goal and thinks about how many monsters he can take on at once. He is a pretty conservative guy, so he decides that if he encounters more than 4 monsters, he will run. He shouldn't encounter more than 5 in this low-level labyrinth, but if he does, Rent determines that it would be the end of him. Rent then gets really down on himself for being weak, even after being an adventurer for 10 years, and he's been training for 20 years. He has spirit energy, mana, and divinity. Even the highest ranked adventurers rarely have all 3, but Rent wishes he could have just one strong power. Usually, people like him who are not cut out to be an adventurer quit. However, Rent trained every single day without fail to try to make it work. He even asked that one girl to teach him about monsters and magic. He has continued trying in order to achieve his goal of becoming a mithril class adventurer. It's the highest rank, and not even naturally gifted people reach it easily. At this rank, you will find those that have saved entire nations. Rent is determined to become one, and not even being turned into a skeleton will stop him. Rent starts taking out more skeletons and wonders if he's getting stronger than when he was a human. He eventually takes out another slime with ease and becomes certain that he's getting stronger. Rent collects some more slime goo, but stops when the light comes out of it. This time is shockingly much more different than the others though, as his body begins to change. Muscles form all over his body and hair bursts out of his skull. Hair, skin, and eyes follow soon after, and when the process is done, he's finally able to make some growling noises. Rent has successfully evolved into a ghoul. He is really just a creepy, dried out corpse, but he's just glad to finally have flesh again. This is a major step in the right direction. Most importantly though, if he keeps working hard, Rent thinks he might be able to become an even higher ranking undead, possibly even a vampire. With now having flesh, Rent gives his voice a try, but all that comes out is a roar. He is glad just to be able to make noise and gives it another try. He manages to say hello and good morning, but he sounds like a terrifying zombie more than anything, and determines that it will need some practice. Sometime later, we find our flesh-having protagonist as he fights some goblins. These overweight goblins are very dangerous in large groups, but Rent uses the layout of the dungeon to isolate a couple. Rent has evolved into a ghoul and finally has some muscle now. He is more agile compared to when he was just a bunch of bones. However, what is most surprising is that his mana, spirit energy, and divinity have all increased. Our boy is getting stronger quickly as he can now not only strengthen himself, but his sword as well. He does just that to separate the goblins' heads from their bodies, and wonders if he's now even stronger than when he was a human. Just then, Rent hears fighting in the distance, and we see that it's the girl from the guild. This blonde chick makes quick work of a weak skeleton monster, and Rent rejoices as it's been so long since he has seen a human. Rent has to stop himself from approaching her though, as he reminds himself that he's a hideous and disgusting looking ghoul, with skin that is barely attached to his body. If he walks to her like this, then she will surely try to end him or run away. He decides to watch her from a distance like a half-dead creep, and notices that he has never seen her before. Rent determines that she must be a rookie, and explains that he knows practically every adventurer in the town. He knows them because adventurers can be a tough crowd. They tend to make fun of weaklings like our boy, so it helps to know their abilities and who their friends are. Rent keeps following her like a stalker, and watches as she encounters another skeleton. He can tell that she was well trained, but she's still weak and she needs to land a lot of hits. Rent knows that she's waiting for the perfect time to strike, but points out that she isn't paying attention to her surroundings. This proves to be a grave mistake as she is pinned against the wall, but she shows her resolve to become a real adventurer. She heroically fights back, but the skeleton just overpowers her. With no other choice, Rent rushes to rescue her, and she is shocked to see a hideous ghoul. Rent wishes she would attack the skeleton while he has it distracted, but this girl is pretty useless. Rent just slices the skeleton in half and goes to check on the girl. Unfortunately, he still sounds like a zombie, so she freaks out when he tries to tell her his name. Rent makes it clear that he is not her enemy by tossing his sword, and she realizes that he's trying to talk. He explains that he is Rent the Adventurer, and she wonders if he is wearing some kind of disguise. Rent can't even explain what happened really, as he died but he is still alive. She can tell that he isn't like the other monsters, and thanks him for saving her. Rent has to assure this terrified girl that he isn't going to end her life, but does ask for help. She agrees to buy him a robe so he can return back to town, and he lets her keep the change after she does so. This girl introduces herself as Rena, the daughter of a knight, and she promises to do this for him as repayment for him saving her. She leaves, but Rent can't help but notice how cautious she was being around him. A proper adventurer would report a mysterious ghoul like himself to the guild, but Rent believes that this girl he just met and knows nothing about won't betray him. Back in town, the first thing this chick does is run to the guild. The guild lady from earlier was worried about her, and Rena explains that she has an urgent question to ask her. Back in the dungeon, Rent fights another slime, and finally confirms that he is a lot stronger than when he was a human. In fact, he is not only stronger, his body now moves exactly how he wants it to. Rent destroys yet another slime by hitting its core perfectly, and he begins to wonder if his vision is getting better as well. He assumes that it's actually combat intuition, something you can't learn from training or studying. Rent can't help but think of the irony, as he only got the power he has always wanted most after he ended up in this rotting corpse of a body. Just then, Rent is surprised to see that Rena has returned. Rent must assure her that he isn't some other ghoul, and explains that ghouls don't show up on the early levels like this. She can tell that Rent has gotten a little better at talking, and our diligent hero explains that he has been practicing. Rena has brought him some clothes, but gets startled when she tries to give him his change. She apologizes for still being terrified of him because he looks like he was in the Thriller video, and tells him that she will eventually get used to it. Rent thinks she did a great job picking clothes since the robe will conceal his whole body, and it's something a maid would wear. This nice person got him some other things as well, and she explains that she had to ask someone where all the shops are since she is new to town. Aside from boots and gloves, she also brought some bandages. This chick has surprisingly thought of everything, as she explains that he can use it to cover his arms and legs. This gesture makes Rent want to cry, but his decrepit body lacks the moisture and tear ducts to do so. Rent puts everything on and actually looks pretty good. It's much easier to move in it all than he thought it would be, but he admittedly loses some visibility. He will still be able to fight though, so he tells Rena that it's all perfect. She makes a pretty bad move by showing him his now hideous face, but she reveals that she brought him a mask. Rena knew his hard to look at face would be a problem, so she got it for him. This mask slams itself onto his face like it knew how bad it needed to be hidden, and Rent is shocked to find that it won't come off. They both freak out, and this dim-witted girl explains that looking back, the shop she got it from did seem a bit suspicious. It wasn't one of the shops her friend showed her, and she bought it because it was cheap. It was only a crazy low 3 copper coins, but she explains that she did check it for curses. Nothing happened when she touched it, but Rent determines that the mask must have a curse that activates when it's put on. Rena is shocked to see that Rent can use divinity, and he wonders if he can break the curse now that he has more divinity. Unfortunately, he runs out of energy, so she apologizes. Rent explains that the mask responded to his divinity, so all he will have to do is save up some money and ask the powerful cleric to break the curse. He tries to console her, but backs away when he remembers that he is a monster. Rena stops him though, as she has come to realize that Rent is not a bad person. She says that she isn't scared anymore, but she is still shaking. Rent tells her that she doesn't have to force herself, and she can take her time until she's really used to him being a rotting decrepit zombie. Rena promises that it won't take long, and the two head back to town. On their way, Rena explains that there weren't any jobs for rookies like herself in the capital, so she came to Malt. Rent is still surprised that she came all the way out to the countryside, but she explains that she wants to see the world. Her main goal is to get stronger and become a full-fledged adventurer fast. Rent suggests that it's better for an adventurer to be a coward like him, since everyone only has one life to live. She agrees for some reason, and he jokes about how zombies like him are rare, so they both laugh it up like it was the funniest joke ever. When they arrive at Malt, Rent points out that a lot of people know him there, so they will surely know that something is wrong if he shows his ID. They decide to use another gate, and Rent thanks his new friend as he would never have gotten this far without her. She says it's not a big deal, but he explains that he is a monster, and if she helps him get into town, she will be considered a criminal. She could lose her adventurer's license, and he doesn't want to cause her those kind of problems. This girl is determined though, and explains that if it wasn't for him, she wouldn't be alive. The skeleton would have ended her, so she doesn't mind risking her life for him this one time. At the west entrance, their identities are confirmed as adventurers, but one of the guards has some kind of problem with Rent's unusual appearance. The situation gets tense as they demand to see Rent's face, but Rena brilliantly explains that Rent's mask is cursed and he can't remove it. She then says that his voice is all messed up because he was horribly injured by a monster, and Rent shows his disfigured ear as proof. Rena tells them that he just bought the mask to hide his hideous scars, but it turned out to be cursed. The guards feel terrible about his awful luck, and Rent even offers to let them pull the mask. The guard gets all the proof he needs when his feeble attempt to remove the mask fails, so he allows Rent to enter. Rent credits Rena for their success, but she once again just says that it's all part of her repayment. However, just then, Rent disappears. Rent just watches her desperately search for him like a jerk, and thinks about how she is a good kid. She wears a bunch of cheap equipment, but it's been well maintained. She is also a decent fighter, and isn't that dumb. Most importantly though, she is brave, so he is sure that she will make a fine adventurer. Rent explains that anyone he knew with her kind of talent eventually left him. He must leave her for now, and when he looks a little more human, he promises to apologize to her face to face. Afterwards, we see why Rent really left Rena behind, as he goes to see a more suitable human cooperator. Someone with a bit of a past, and a person who can be trusted to keep secrets. Rent just walks into a house where he finds his very suitable human cooperator named Lorraine. He tries to wake her up with his messed up voice, but she refuses. He threatens to drop a book on her head so she knows it's Rent, but she's surprised to see him all covered up. Rent doesn't prepare her at all and shockingly just shows her his ghoulish arm.